Alright, how you guys doing? Welcome back to the second video in the series, where we create the media queries and the responsiveness for this homepage we created. So as you seen in the first video, this is our homepage. But if we scroll down and we shrink our width on the page, you can see that as we get smaller, the what we do section gets super skinny. It doesn't really look good. As well as our core team, everything gets super skinny. It doesn't look good. A lot of the sections still look good, but these two in particular don't look good. And then as we get even smaller, you'll see that everything just breaks around 700 800 pixels in the width. I mean, the width is not even 100% width anymore. The text is way too big. These are way too skinny to read. The core team is way too small. And then as you get even smaller, everything just continues to break. It looks horrible. If we go to like a mobile device preset, like a Galaxy S5, you can see that this is just not what we're looking for. I don't know what happened here. It looks terrible. iPad, let me go back. iPad looks decent, but again, this text is too big and things are just way too skinny. So this video is going to be all about creating media queries to ensure that it looks good on every device. I've actually added them already. If I save and refresh the page, you'll see that as I scroll down now, once we get around 1200 pixels, the width on the what we do section and the text size, the font size on the banner shrink, and the width goes from about 75 to 100%. So that keeps them looking good as we scroll down, as well as the core team. Once we go down under 1200, it takes up the full width instead of about 50%. And then as we go down to about, let's say 800 pixels, I think is where the next breakpoint I added. 800 pixels, you'll see that right as it begins to get too skinny, everything goes from being in one row to one column. The same with the creative or the what we do section. It goes from all being in one row to being all in one column. The font size, I believe everything is the same there. And then as we scroll down even more, you'll see that once we hit about 500 pixels, the recent projects will go to one row. And the nav bar at 500 pixels goes from all being in one row to being in one column. It takes up the whole column, as well as the numbers. Those go from being horizontal to a column as well. And if we go to like a mobile device, you can see it looks very good. On a Galaxy S5, it looks very good on an iPhone 10. It looks very good on an iPad. It looks very good on an iPad Pro. So this video is going to be all about the media queries. And yeah, let's get right into the code. I hope you guys enjoy the video, and let's get into it. Alright, so this video will be all the media queries and the responsive design. The way I like to start doing it is, well, let me get rid of all the media queries first. I'll just cut them out. I'll leave the comment in there showing where I'm going to start them. The way I like to start is basically just scrolling down until things start looking weird, and adding media queries at that point. So the first point that I noticed right away that things start looking weird. I mean, even at 1300 width here, I'm looking here, everything looks good still. But as I get to about 1200, things here are looking a little too skinny for my liking. Things aren't too bad here, but it's still a little too skinny, and we might as well take preventative measures, because as you get to 1000, it's way too skinny. And same with what do we do section, it just doesn't look good. So I'm going to add a breakpoint at about 1200 pixels, and the way we do that is we go into our code, and we will type @media only screen and max width of 1200 pixels. And if you're doing mobile first design, meaning you coded your website to look good on a mobile device first, and you're looking to expand it to a desktop, you would use min width here. What this means is because you set your HTML because of this meta tag here, it recognizes the width of your device and what device you're actually on. So when we set our max width to 1200, all the CSS we write in this section will be applied when the max width is 1200 or less. So as it says, the max width of 1200. So anything less than 1200, these CSS properties in this media query will apply. So you start off with the highest width of media query, and then under that you'd put, you know, like your next media query of like 800 pixels, which we'll get to later. But you want your highest width first, because as the web browser reads down, it'll read these first, and it'll run these, which will have they'll take over these, basically. I don't know the word, but yeah, these CSS properties will overwrite these CSS properties, because the max width of 800 don't apply when these apply. Anyways, you'll understand later as we get to it. So let's just start coding. So the way I like to do it is I go right under 1200, which is right about here, so that way I'll see any changes that I'm making. And the first changes that I want to make is I want to just shrink this font down in the banner, because it is way too big, and once we shrink down any further, it'll just mess things up. So I'm going to take preventative measures and shrink it now. So I'm just going to comment out for my banner section just the way I did before, just to keep things organized. And we are going to go right to the banner H1. And the easiest way to find what you want to do is in the dev tools here, you can click the little select an element in the page to inspect it, and just click it, and you'll find what you're looking for here. And we're looking for the banner H1. If I enlarge this a little bit here, and you can see that the font size is just ridiculous. It looked good on a big desktop, but at around 1200 pixels, it is just way too big. So we're going to change the banner H1 to somewhere around, we'll try 3. That looks much better. And then now the paragraph tag is just way too large. So under the banner H1, you're basically just writing CSS inside this media query. And these effects take place over all the other CSS properties you've written. So we'll go banner paragraph, and we'll set the font size of that to like roughly 1.5, and that's much better. So as you see, once we hit 1200, right under 1200, it shrinks to that media query. So that is the whole process. As we scroll down here, we're going to change all of these properties to make them look good at around this size, and then we'll shrink it down more and change them to that size. And that's how you do it. That's how you make a responsive website, responsive design, and that's how media queries work. There obviously is a lot more to media queries than what I'm covering here. You can set a lot of different properties with these here, and you can do height as well, and min width, and there's a lot more. I encourage you to research on your own, but for this tutorial, we'll just be doing max width media queries to make everything look good on every device possible as we shrink down. So our banner looks good, our nav is all fine. This section though, the what we do section, is not looking the best. It's looking a little skinny for each individual section. So that I will target next. We will go what we do. And the first thing I want to target in here is the width of each one of these devices, each one of these services. The service section, so as I'm looking, as you see, I click the this button again, and it allows you to see what you're looking at here. So the services takes up the whole width of the screen, which is perfect. But each individual service here, we have a width of 20%, and I really don't like that. See, notice if I uncheck that over here, it shrink, enlarges to the full width of the page. Sorry. And I don't necessarily want the full width, but I do want a bigger width than this. So you can mess with in the dev tools with the property here, and just as I press the up arrow, I'll find something that I like. And honestly, 30% looks pretty good. So we'll use 30%. So we'll target the service, Again, it is the service we're looking for, each individual service, and we just overwrite the width that we've written previously to about 30%. And if we refresh the page, that is what it is now, 30%. See, notice here, the normal CSS on line 94, which we have somewhere up here, way up here, we just overwrite that width to be the width 30%. So there we go. That looks good. As we scroll down, the same with our team. It just doesn't look, they're too skinny. So if I go in here to each team member, I don't like how skinny each section is. And if you look, we set the team here, the team div, to a width of 75%. So notice if I uncheck that, it basically just applies like 100% because that's what the default would be. So honestly, we're gonna use 100% there. I think it looks a lot better. Or you know what? Maybe we'll use like 95, or we can again mess with the dev tools here and just find something that looks good. We'll use 95, so it gives us a little bit of space on each side. I like that. So again, I'm gonna comment for that section, which is the our team section. And again, we are targeting the team div, team, and we're setting the width to 95%. So that looks good. And I think that's it. I mean, under 1200, everything's looking good. So from here, I will continue to scroll down until I find the next point that everything breaks. And I've found it already, but let's see if I can, as I scroll down here. So I'm at about 1,000. At about 1,000, everything looks good. I think everything still looks fairly normal. So we'll continue to scroll down here. We're about 850. Things here are starting to look a little cramped, but not too bad. Still looks pretty good. Team, I don't mind it. Still looks pretty good. So we'll keep scrolling. And notice right about here, things start looking weird. So we'll make a breakpoint about 800. 800. Things start looking kind of weird. You got a little white space over here. I'm not a fan. So we'll make our next breakpoint will be at 800. So we will get out of this media query under this curly brace down here, curly bracket, and add another media query, media only the screen, and a max width of 800 pixels. And the first thing I want to add here is, I guess we'll do this section here. Things are looking a little cramped. So we'll target that. So if we go here and take a look at it, we have the service section, which we have a flex direction of column, everything. Okay, let's just mess around with some of these properties and see what happens here. I think everything's looking good. Let's go down to the services and see what we got. So this is basically how you do it. You just kind of go through each property and mess around until you find something that looks good. And I think I see what I want to do here. So notice we have each individual service, and we have everything flexed, which is good. But I want to change the flex direction from row, which is default. We didn't set it default, to column. I want these to appear one by one. So I want this to take up the whole width, and I want them to appear in one column. So the first thing I'll do is I will comment the what we do section, and I will grab the services. And if you look, we didn't set any flex direction, so by default we know that it's row. So we're going to change the flex direction. We don't have to add display flex or anything because it is still the display flex from our CSS previously. So we'll just set the flex direction to column. And if we refresh, under 800 pixels, notice, right under 800, this is what we get. And it kind of breaks everything, but at the same time, it is what we're looking for as far as these being the proper, we wanted them all in one column like that. So the next step would be aligning the items center, AIC, and that will center them. And the reason that they're going out of their container here, the what we do section, is if you look at the services section, actually, yeah, the service section section up here, we have a fixed height of 600 pixels. Notice if I uncheck that, it fixes our problem. And the reason for that is because we set a fixed height, and basically taking that off will allow it to just take the proper height that it needs to fill up the content, as opposed to before where we're saying we only want you to be 600 pixels no matter what. So we don't want a height there. So now we're going to go ahead and target the service section, which I'll put above the services just to keep things in order like I was previously. Service section. And we will set a height of 100%. That way it'll just take up 100% of whatever content is inside it. And as you can see in the media query here, it is doing just that. So that looks good. The next thing I'll do is I'm going to add a text align center there, just to notice that centered the buttons and just centered everything else, but mainly the buttons. So that looks good. One thing I want to do is give some spacing to this right here, this H1 element, which is the service section H1. So service section, right under that, I will go service section H1. And I'm going to just give it a margin of 20 pixels on the top and bottom and 0 on the left and right. And that gives you some spacing there. Notice if I get rid of it again, it gives us a little bit of spacing there, which looks pretty good. And we also want some spacing at the bottom of this button, of each button. Because the way they are now, they're right touching the next section, the next service, which we don't want. So underneath the service H1, actually, so let's keep things organized. That is in the services, that is in each individual service. So that is a service button. So we'll go service, underneath services, we will go service button, and we'll set a margin. Technically we want margin bottom. We could add just a margin bottom here, which is what we're gonna do. So margin bottom, about 20 pixels. And that gives you a little bit of space. Maybe we'll do like 30, just for yeah, I like 30. Looks pretty good. And one more thing I've noticed is that it's the service into the individual services are pretty skinny. And if you scroll down, we have a width here of 30%. Which to me is not, it's way too skinny. So let's just mess in the DevTools around until we get something that we like. And honestly, maybe we'll go 60%. Looks pretty good. Yeah, I like 60%. So that's in the service. Service. So that'll go above the button and below services. So we'll put that right here. Just to keep things consistent and organized. Again, you can organize these however you want, but I just like to keep things as organized as possible. And that will be a width of 60%. So if we refresh the page, we don't need to, but there you go. Our service section looks pretty good. And I think that is all we need to do there. The next section we need to worry about, I guess well, obviously our team is way too skinny. But we'll get to that later. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to have these display on one column as opposed to one row. But let's change the recent projects first, because as they get smaller, notice that the width here, you have some white space showing up. So if you grab the element, this little tool right here, select an element, and I highlight over here, notice it's the projects div that is causing that white space. You can see it's going over there. And the reason for that is we have a set width here of 800 pixels. And if I turn that off, it fixes that issue. So what happens if we just mess with it here and change it to 100%? Actually, that fixes the issue right there. So we're going to go ahead on this 800 media query and change the project's width to 100%. Let's start with that. So in this media query still, so above this curly brace and below this one, we'll add our comment. We'll say recent projects. And then the first thing we will target is the project's width. So we'll just go projects. We want the width just to be 100%. We don't care about anything else. And that looks good. So as we scroll down, that looks pretty good to me. Okay, so for now, that's fine. Let's worry about the next section, which is the team section. Each individual team member is way too skinny, and I really don't like it. I'd rather have it all in one column, like we did with the what we do section. So that's what we'll start with. Again, in this media query, we will add another comment, and we may come back to recent projects here in a little bit, but for now we're just gonna worry about the next section, which is our team section. And the first thing I want to do is change. If I grab this tool again and look at this div, the team div, we have flex, and from the 1200 media query, we already have set the width to 95%, so that's good. But we want to change the flex direction here to column, just like we did previously. So we will go team, flex direction, column, and there we go. That was pretty simple, actually. That changed everything for us. Again, I want to change the text. I'm gonna go ahead and do TAC, text align center, so everything is centered. That looks good. And then I want to add some spacing on each team member here at the bottom of the team member. So I'll just do margin bottom on the team member, which I'll target right here. And a lot of this is just trial and error. You shrink the page a little bit, see what's broken, find out where you want to change things, and then you add some CSS accordingly. So margin bottom, that is not how you do that. Team member, we'll add some margin bottom, let's say like 50 pixels. And yeah, that looks pretty good. The only issue again is it's going over the height. And if you look at the team section div, again, we have a set height of 500 pixels. If we turn that off though, it fixes the issue. So that's team section. I'll put that at the top where it belongs. Team section. We'll just set the height to be 100%. All right, that looks pretty good. And then again on this H1 here, we want to add some margin on the top and bottom to give it some spacing. So that'll be our next step. So under team section, if we look at it, team section H1, so team section H1 right underneath, just to keep things consistent. We will add just a margin on the top and bottom of roughly, let's see, 20 pixels, 0 on the left and right. And that looks pretty good. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So honestly, this section looks good. Yeah, we can call this section done. So now, under 800 pixels, I would say our website looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. So let's continue to scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Notice that we set this, back when we created in the first video, we set the flex wrap to, or flex, what was it? Let me check actually, because I don't know the actual term. Flex wrap to wrap. So that was able to wrap things when they got past the actual width that they needed to be. So for the most part, this looks good. But again, if you look under 800 here, the height goes past the actual height of the recent project section. So one easy way to fix that would just be changing the recent project's height here to 100%. And we'll do that on the 800 media query as well. So recent projects, we'll get rid of the height. 800, we'll go back up to projects, and it would be above this. So we'll go here, recent projects, and we'll just set the height, to 100%. And that should fix our problem. And it does. Notice there's not really much spacing here, or here for that matter. So there's a few ways to do this. I could just add a margin on the top and bottom to the whole section here, or I could do what I did previously, add some margin top and bottom to this, and then I guess add some at the bottom here. I'm gonna do the latter. Or the former, whatever. I'm gonna add some margin top and bottom to this whole section, and actually it would be padding because I don't want spacing on the outside. I want spacing on the inside. So to the recent projects, we're gonna add a padding top and bottom of 20 pixels, 0 on the left and right, and it gives us some space. I might even go more than that. I'll go 30, and I like that. It's not bad. But I also am gonna add some spacing to this H1. So recent projects, H1 right underneath. And I'm thinking 20 pixels margin, top and bottom. Not bad. Maybe just the bottom, because we did add some padding already to the top. So let's just do the bottom. So an easy way to do that would be, I guess just margin bottom. Let's do that. 20 pixels. And that looks good. That looks really good to me. So we'll go with that. So now, as we continue to scroll down, we're looking good. We get down more to around 500. Everything's still looking pretty good. I'm happy with it. But at about 500, right under 500, this text again is too big. I don't like the way the nav is set up. I want these to be, instead of one row, to be all in a column. And I'm also going to change these numbers to be all in a column as well. So we will add another media query. So outside of this media query, this 800 media query, we'll add one more media query. And that will be media only screen and max width of 500 pixels. Okay. So we'll do the nav first. We'll start at the top. We want this to display all in a column, like we did with the other sections, instead of horizontal like this, because it's starting to get a little too close and then things start breaking. So under 500, we will change this to a column. So the first thing we're going to target is we'll go to the UL, because again, if you look at the elements we have here, we have the nav, and that's flexed, which is good. The UL is also flexed, which is good. But notice if you uncheck flex, it goes in one column, which is kind of what we want. But we could just add a flex direction to the UL. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go nav UL flex direction column, and if you look at it, that's exactly what happens. So obviously it's broken. The reason for that, again, is we set a height on the nav originally to 50 pixels. If I uncheck that, that fixes our problem right away. So above the UL, we will target the nav, and we will set the height to 100% of the content, 100% of what it needs to take up. And there we go. Looks pretty good. One thing I'm going to do with this text on the UL, I'm going to TAC it, text align center. So now the text is all centered. It looks much better. And that looks good. Yeah, I like that. You know what I'm going to do too with the UL? I'm going to set the width of it to 100%. And then notice if I look at it again, yeah, they take up the whole width. And the reason for that, I'm going to show you right now, is because we're going to go into the nav ULLI. And we're going to add a border bottom 1 pixel solid black. And that is the reason for that. If I got rid of this width on the UL, it only go, to that width right there. But I want the width of the 100% of the whole screen. So there we go. And each LI has a little bit of margin here. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of that on the LIs. So in the LI, margin 0. What does that look like? Okay, now the line goes all the way across, which looks good. And the next thing I want to do is increase the spacing on the inside here. I want to make these buttons bigger. And one thing you can do to check them out is just click that tool again, and then click, and then I'm gonna mess with the padding, which is right here on the LIs. If I increase the top and bottom padding, That's what we're looking for. We're looking for like 15. And we'll just do 15 all the way around. So we'll just do padding 15 pixels. And it looks pretty good. Right under 500, and notice it switches. So I'm happy with that. The next thing, we're gonna go ahead and change the text size on this banner, because again, this text is too big. So in this same media query, but underneath the nav, I'm gonna leave some comments. I'm gonna say the banner section, and we're gonna target the banner H1. And we're gonna set the font size to somewhere around 9M. Oh, that is very small. I'm not liking that. Let's go like 1. Let's go. Why is that so small? Let's go like 1.5. Man, that is tiny. I'm not sure why that's so small. That looks pretty good for me. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Also, the paragraph is way too large now. We'll change the font size on that as well. Maybe 0.9 was correct on that. And yeah, I'm happy with that. We can go 1, make it a little bigger. Yeah, looks pretty good. And I'm gonna add a little bit of margin top, or just some margin overall to that. Let's say 10 pixels. Yeah, let's just do margin top. I don't want any on the bottom. There's already enough on the bottom, and let's go like 20. All right, that looks pretty good. So our nav is done, our banner is done. Boom, looks good. Our whole what we do section still looks pretty good from previous. Recent projects is getting to be a little close. We might want to change that, I guess, right now, because it's, as you get down, it's gonna get a little, although it does wrap for us, so it looks pretty good. You know what? We could leave that. Yeah, I'm fine with this section as well. So the next section we will change is the numbers. We want these numbers to be all in one column, just like everything else. So that will be our next section. In this same media query, again, we will add our numbers. And the first thing I want to do is, if I look at my section here, with the numbers section, okay, that looks good. But our numbers div, look at it, it only covers, something's going on. It's only covering 2 of the elements, and the other 2 are outside. And that's because we have the width to 50%, which we don't need. So we can take that off right away. And we can also change the flex direction to column. So let's target the numbers. Numbers. And we'll set the width to 100% right away. Fix that issue. And then we're going to set the flex direction to column. All right. It looks good. I mean, it looks bad, but it looks good. The reason, again, for it going over its section is because if you look at the numbers section, we set a hard-coded height in here of 300 pixels, where if we turn that off, it pretty much fixes the entire issue. So that we will do next. We'll go numbers section. We will set, what was I? Yeah, we'll set a height of 100%. 100% of the content inside. All right. And you know what? I'm noticing with the numbers section, I don't like this line going all the way across. So instead of 100% here, I'm just gonna put auto. So basically, just take up the width that you need to take up. It's basically like 100%, except, I mean, it's not like 100%. It's auto. It's take up the width that you would take up normally, that you need to take up. So, or basically by default, which is just the width that it needs to take up. So that'll get rid of the lines going all the way across. So that looks really good, honestly. The only thing I want to do is add some spacing to this H1, numbers section H1. So numbers section H1. We will add a margin, let's say 20 pixels, and 0 on the sides. 20 pixels top, bottom, 0 on the sides. And that looks really good, honestly. So I'm happy with that. And really, that looks good to me for that section. So let's move on. Let's go to the contact section. Again, this looks pretty good. But as we get under, 300, it's kind of pushing and it's going off the side. It's not looking the best. So let's just change it now and shrink this in a little bit, so that way we're preventing anything in the future once you get smaller to take place. So again, in that media query, underneath the number section, I'm going to add the contact section. And in here, all we're really going to do is change the width of the form. So right now, if you look at the form, we have a width of 400 pixels. And I want it to be basically just that width, which is technically auto, or is no width, just default. So if I set the width of auto, it'll go to that size, which is perfect. So all we have to do here is contact section, form, and width auto, and there we go. And I mean, our page looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. Our nav is set. As you scroll down, the recent projects wraps automatically. Maybe I should increase the width on each project. We can mess around with the projects div. Oh, it is taking 100% width already, so no, we're already set with that. I could increase the width of these. I mean, maybe I do. On the 500 media query, let's set the width of the project to 260. So again, 500 media query, width of the project, which is right underneath of what we do. Banner numbers. Okay, we didn't even add it in there. It is above numbers. It's above team. It's above numbers. So let's add it right here. It's below banner and above numbers. We'll add recent projects. Just because, I don't know. I feel like I should change it a little bit. We'll just change the width a little bit here. So project, each individual project, we'll just target the project and set the width to about 260 pixels. And again, this is only when the max width is 500. So if we're above 500, you're not going to notice it. As soon as we hit right there, it automatically wraps and everything looks pretty good. And honestly, that's the end. If we go ahead and look at some of our breakpoints, if we click up here and go to responsive, let's see what happens on an iPad Pro. iPad Pro looks phenomenal still, like it did before. Everything looks good. If we go to an iPad, notice that the media queries kicked in here because we're under 800, and that looks very good as well. Let's go to an iPhone 10. Notice under 500, the nav changed. These changed to be all in one column. The recent projects changed. Everything. I mean, this looks very good on an iPhone 10. iPhone 5, same. We have similar. It's very similar. It looks the same. Everything looks good. The text is a little big here, but it's honestly perfect. We could maybe shrink it a little bit. Let's say 1.9, 1.8. Let's do 1.8 on the 500 media query. So again, I'm just gonna go up to 500. Banner, instead of 2, we'll just go 1.8, just for an iPhone 5. And yeah, I think that's it. That is literally the end of all the media queries. And if you go again to to 1400, 1500, as we shrink down, everything changes to what we set. Boom. And it looks good. That's kind of how media queries work. You just set them. You start with the largest one at the top, at least for max width. If you're doing a desktop, the way we did this website, we did desktop first, and then we're shrinking down to mobile. You do max width media queries, starting with the largest breakpoint, and you work your way down. So this is the one breakpoint. This is the second one here, and this is the third one. And then, yeah, you just continue to go down until you're happy with everything. If you're doing it the reverse way, you're starting at this place and you're trying to increase the size, you would actually use min width media queries. So you want all these CSS properties to occur when the minimum width is 500. So if we were to set min width right here, all these CSS properties would only come into effect when the page is over 500 pixels. The way we have it set now is all these CSS properties only come into effect when the page is 500 pixels or less. So mobile first design, you use min width, and desktop first design, the way we did this project, you use max width. And like I said before, definitely do some research on media queries. There's a lot more that goes into them than what I showed you in this video. But again, I mean, the website looks pretty good. If you go onto an iPixel 2, I mean, the website looks, you know, it looks good. It's usable. So that is it for this video. The next video, we will be adding JavaScript, adding hover transitions, animations, fade in, everything you can think of. We're going to be adding some JavaScript into our website to make things more dynamic. So definitely stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed this video, please drop the like, drop the subscribe. Let me know what you enjoyed about the video, what you didn't enjoy about the video, what you thought I did well, what I didn't do well. I really appreciate the feedback because, like I said in the first video, I'm new to making videos like this, and I plan on making a lot more in the future, but your feedback is crucial, and I really appreciate it because, you know, I'm trying to help out as much as I can. So, yeah, I really appreciate it, guys. Until the next video, I will see you later. Take it easy, guys.